We now move to part 4, the age of contemporary art and beyond. This is the period from the 90s onwards, and it corresponds to the post-second generation artists. As we move away from the second generation, the classification of artists via generation becomes more difficult. Some of these young artists started under the tutelage of the second generation. Some did it by themselves, and even more went overseas to study. Therefore, there is no longer a clear lineage of passing on the generation concept in this case. The development vein seen in the first and second generation was no longer so evident. The other thing to consider is that contemporary art came into the scene from the 1970s onwards, causing of the output of the younger generation of artists to move away from the traditional aesthetic art. Therefore, you see the young artists coming out of untraditional mediums like installation, videos, even performance art. But over here, we still concentrate more on the painterly artists. And of course, it is still very difficult for young artists to survive in Singapore because the patronage is still very lacking, and also we have a very high cost of living. And therefore, there are less younger artists in general. In the last maybe 5 to 10 years, this trend is slowly reversing. The first artist we want to introduce in this category is Boo Sze Yang. He was born in 1965, and he graduated from the Nanyang Academy of Fine Arts in 1991, and he had 2 postgraduate qualifications from UK in 1995 and 2004, respectively. And he had won many prizes like the Philip Morris Singapore Asian Art Award in 2003 and Platinum Award UOB Painting of the Year in 2009. He had also taught in NAFA and a few other institutions. Generally, he is quite successful among this new batch of artists. Over here is what we call the Being series that he did during his first stay in the UK when he was studying. It was a series of abstract works that dealt with the notion of identity, in which identity is a changing notion. Therefore, the state of being and becoming, and this is why it was named the Being series. At that time, he was intrigued by the question of identity. So for him, he feels that as a Chinese Singaporean, what is his identity? So he will typically start with a blank canvas, and he will not have an idea of the final outcome. And he will start brush work by brush work. And each brushwork is like a little bit of self-discovery for himself. So this is how the painting was made. The next series to introduce is what we call the Watchdog series. It is around 2001. The Watchdog series dealt with issues like censorship and the police state and surveillance of the citizens. In this work, there are elements of dot matrix which were previously found in pop art. Therefore, we noticed that this generation of artists were interested in topics beyond aesthetics. This work is what we call the Journey to the West series. It was painted just before his second trip to the United Kingdom. It was about going to the West to retrieve scriptures, which was the central theme in the book Journey to the West. So for him, it is reflection of his stage of life where he is going to the West again to learn. During his second study trip in Europe, he actually traveled around Europe and he found churches quite amazing to him. He is not a Christian, but he found that the church interior gave him a sense of grandeur, a majestic feeling with interesting lighting effects. Therefore, he decided to paint the interiors of these churches. And he said that these churches usually are very extensively decorated, but he tries to paint them in a more plain manner, removing all these decorative elements. And he likes to see the resulting effect, something more closer to spiritual meaning of religion. So after he came back to Singapore, he was trying to find something similar in Singapore, what he has painted previously, like the church series that he has seen in the United Kingdom or Europe. But over here, he visited our churches and he found that the churches were too small and it didn't give him that feeling. But one day, while he was accompanying his wife to Ion Orchard, he suddenly found that, wow, the feeling come back again. And therefore, he embarked on a series, what we call the shopping mall series. And this is one example. Also, the shopping mall were also coined, given the term temple of consumerism. So this is where he found the linkage. Both the church series and the shopping mall series were more painterly in nature, and it does not have those underlying agenda, unlike his previous works. So you can see here, contemporary artists have different motivations when it comes to painting as compared to earlier generation of artists. The earlier generation of artists were more motivated by the beauty and the aesthetics, whereas contemporary artists often have hidden agenda in their works, and they are more focused in these hidden concepts. Next, we introduce to you Anthony Chua Say Hua. He was born in 1966 and graduated from NAFA in 1992. Like Boo Sze Yang, he also went to the West, in this case Australia, to further his studies. He deals mainly with Chinese ink on paper and giving the medium a fresh contemporary expression. And personally, I think he is very talented in ink expressions. This was a very early work, dated 1999, pastel on canvas. Anthony worked on Western mediums like oil and canvas, etc. during the early part of his career. This is an ink work dating from the 2000s. You can see that the ink smudges is very beautiful. And Anthony seems to have this talent and flair to present ink in its best forms. This is an example from 2013. He's trying to capture the different textures and moods of old walls. This is an example from 2012, his version of shop houses in Singapore using the ink medium. This is another example from 2015, where he employs a cubist treatment to his works. Anthony's works always give us the energy of movement and passion. Next, we introduce to you Kwan Yuan. He is a much younger artist born in 1986. He graduated with a Bachelor of Arts with honours from Nanyang Technological University, Singapore in 2012. He mainly works in the watercolour medium. And I think he shows a very promising potential given his young age, vis-a-vis the kind of artistic heights that he has currently achieved. His works were selected for numerous international watercolour exhibitions. And he likes to depict cityscapes. He is a signature member of the prestigious American Watercolor Society. So here we have a work coming from 2014, a scene of a fruit store. Kuan Yuan's method of working starts often with a photo. However, we should not go with the idea that he simply copied from a photo. What he did was he started with a photo, but he will modify the photo. For example, in this case, you look at the painting, obviously the color scheme is different from what you see in real life. Other aspects that he need to consider is the composition, and also some of the places he give it more details, and some of the places he would have to reduce the level of details. Whereas in the photograph, the details is instantaneously captured. Kuan Yuan has a flair with shopping malls and cityscapes, a subject matter that none of the first and second generation artists tried to attempt. We must understand that artists respond to their environment. And if an artist of today tries to do the subject matter of yesterday, I think it is not a very good sign. So in this manner, Kuan Yuan is pushing the boundary in his own little ways. This is a gigantic night scene of Singapore skyline. As I said before, one of his forte is in night scenes. This work measures 96 by 176 centimeters. And for any artist to attempt a big piece, it is actually very difficult, because as the size of the painting increase, the more you have to consider. And for watercolor, you can't afford to make too many mistakes, and therefore it is even more difficult. And paintings of such a size will take a few months to complete. Another aspect in Kuan Yuan's art is that he likes to play around with detailed textures of surfaces. So you can see in this painting, he captures the mood and the texture, the feeling of that old circuit breaker. This is a more recent work, Times Square, in 2019. Over here, he used a brighter color scheme. His older works, he likes to use black, and often the color scheme is a bit darker. He still retains that amount of detailedness. Born in 1988, Ben Loong graduated with a diploma in fine arts from LaSalle, followed by a Bachelor of Arts in Fine Art Painting, University of Arts London, in 2014. He likes to explore themes central to human condition and actively documents through the medium of painting and sculpture. He believes in the need for art to capture the fleeting moment because the transient nature of existence. He is best known for his Terra Blanca series. One of the works, titled The River, even won him the highly commended award at UOB Painting of the Year in 2018 under the Established Artist category. The works in the Terra Blanca series are inspired by Ben's fascination with geographical and geological phenomena. They summon a mimetic picture of the natural world and considers it in the context of contemporary society. He works primarily with industrial drywall plaster and building techniques to create a highly textured pattern found in physical environment juxtaposed against patches of gold leaf. Through his works, he invites us to examine the value of our material world. His choice of material is also intertwined in the artist's personal narrative. When he had his first experience with material manipulation, after being taught by his father at the age of 6 to patch a hole in a wall at home. Ben's latest Star series offers us a glimpse into his inner universe. It departs from the Terra Blanca series, which investigates the beauty of natural phenomena in the form of terrestrial landforms, referencing instead the vast and unknown cosmic void. The result is an execution that feels compositionally abstract, freer and unbound by logic. We have come to the end of the talk. In conclusion, I hope you see that Singapore has come a long way since the late 19th century in terms of art development. Today, our art scene is a far cry from those distant years. And even if you compare today with, let's say, 10 or 20 years ago, I think our art scene is much more vibrant compared to those times. However, many Singaporeans are still either oblivious to Singapore art or art in general, or they have doubts about the quality of our artists. I have heard people asking questions like, are artists as good as those in the West, or our artists as good as those in China? Questions like that. I think to be fair, we have to understand that we are a young nation. I mean, it is about 50 years since we got independent. And it will not be fair to compare us with a civilization like China, which is 5,000 years, or even Europe with a painting history of more than 1,000 years. If we continue to support our Singapore artists, I believe one day we'll reach the pinnacle of world art. We have seen that in areas like sports. And after many years, we managed to produce an Olympic champion. So it will be the same for Singapore art. We hope that you can continue to support our artists, to patronize their works, so that they can carry on with their practice. And artists like Kwan Yuan can start their art career very early in their life. And with this, I am very sure one day we'll be able to produce world-class artists. Thank you very much.